Messages of condolences are pouring in following the passing of Fred Arthur Gaselekwe Mogamisi, affectionately known as Bra Fred. The former veteran SABC journalist and parliamentary correspondent passed away on Sunday after a long illness. Fred Mogamisi started working for the then Bophuthatswana Broadcasting Corporation in the early 80s. Former head of news at the SABC, Selemale, remembers him as a dedicated workaholic. He says Fred was good at languages. He covered 3 major languages for both the radio and television sections. He produced reports in English, Afrikaans and Setswana, and he was excellent in all the languages. He was very proficient in all of them. So let's now speak to Mr. Steve Selemale, retired SABC Executive Producer. He worked with Fred most of his career. Thank you very much for making time for speaking to us, Bra Steve.
You are most welcome, Cody.
How was it like to work with Fred?
Look, Cody, I think Fred was one person who was, very particular when it comes to his job. I met Fred in 1983 when we were both, bulletin writers and presenters on SABC News, the then Television 3, on the Setswana desk. He was a very versatile person. He was proficient in all languages, so to speak, especially what we used to call official languages, the English and Afrikaans, plus his Setswana. So he was versatile in those languages. And he was a very diligent person and very, very full of humor to work with.
So I remember when you were working with him, he had so much confidence and trust in you in terms of the way he was strategizing in the assignment desk for the meeting to brainstorm topics, and he was really a careful thinker. So that how did you get along with him in terms of how you were exchanging ideas on the angles of the stories without fighting? Because many journalists would clash in terms of angles and disagree and end up not speaking to each other.
Look, he was very, very careful when it came to, the planning of stories, especially when it comes to, what content the story should have, and the length of the story. You will know, Colin, in television news, each and every story, will have to be assigned a certain amount of time in the bulletin. So you with me, after our editorial meetings, I would usually call him, and then we would discuss how we would like the story to look like, and everything that needs to be put in that story. So he was very careful, especially when it came to, the facts of the story. And he was going to view or listen to his story when the story is on air, to make sure that everything that you have agreed upon in terms of the contents of the story are exactly the way you have agreed, to put into that story.
So when it comes to people management and interacting with colleagues, you were assignment editor as well as executive producer in those roles, and together with him you were in the same senior positions. So how did you handle the situation in terms of working in an environment where there was so much uncertainty because of the transition of the TBVC broadcasters, where people knew that they were going to lose their jobs, they wouldn't be assimilated into the South African Broadcasting Corporation. So there would be despondency during that time. So how did you manage that time of uncertainty, like we are right now in the SABC, facing retrenchment, and imagine the despondency, the discouragement that people would have. But you guys kept the programs going and there was quality on air.
Yeah, Colin, those were, difficult times. But you see, with Fred, his people, how shall I put it, his interaction with people, especially, you know, with me working with him at the level that you have already mentioned. You know, we will have to talk about things that, things that are work-related. So after having solved everything that, you know, we will be discussing in terms of work, then we can always, go to he will always tell you, job first. Rasif, let's do the job first. And then everything else will come thereafter. Then thereafter we will sit, and exchange advices and views in terms of the situation that we will be finding ourselves in. Like, for instance, the very same thing that is happening, in the SABC right now. We would have lengthy discussions about it, and then, but at the same time, our work will have to come first. I usually watch our bulletins. I can see that, there is much effort that is being put into our bulletins, despite the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty prevailing right now at work. That was precisely how we used to handle the situation with Oom Fred. We can have our own problems with, the general situation, prevailing at the work, but the program came first. The news program will always come first with us. We can have our differences thereafter.
Okay, let's talk about, any kind of work situation where there are naughty boys and girls and discipline having to be maintained. How did you deal with Oom Fred in terms of disciplining workers who were out of order, but making sure that there wasn't that, recurrence of disciplinary action and people getting fired? Because sometimes you would see people being naughty, but they would get back in line.
Yeah, look, Oom Fred was a very easygoing person. But when it came to issues of discipline, should somebody within the team, act like, he's showing some signs of ill discipline in terms of what is being required of him. Oom Fred was not going to make a lot of noise to that person, but there will be time when we will call that person, sit down with him, and talk to that person about the problems that we see. And Oom Fred will he's not going to paint the mistakes like, in a white paint. In other words, he's going to call things by their names. If you are wrong, you are wrong with Oom Fred, and that's it. But we are going to talk to you and then warn you that this kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated anymore. That will be how we are going to be dealing with, actions of ill discipline at work. But at the same time, he had a very good sense of humor. A very good sense of humor. After talking to you, in serious terms, we will always have something to laugh about in terms of your behavior. But, pointing it out that this is not going to be tolerated. Please move away from this kind of behavior. Otherwise, you're making an application for trouble.
But Steve, as I'm speaking to you now, I've just seen a picture of myself when I was still a young boy, a freshman in the news industry. Here it's a picture of myself and him co-presenting 8 o'clock live on Bob TV. And I remember you were also working in Mafikeng when we were also preparing for the arrival of former President Thabo Mbeki during those times. So I really want to now engage you very briefly on the attitude of Oom Fred in as far as managerial skills are concerned. Because you worked with him so closely, how would you advise young and upcoming leaders and managers in newsrooms so that you can be able to maintain quality, efficiency, and effectiveness in as far as news quality is concerned? And secondly, how to coach news anchors, both on radio and television, in terms of elocution, pronunciation, being factual, being professional, and how you handle yourself outside the broadcasting space when you are not at work, to be disciplined both in and out of your profession.
Collie, going back to the day when the former President Thabo Mbeki visited our studios in Mafikeng, That was the day when we had, a kind of a lengthy preparatory meeting with Oom Fred and with our colleagues preparing for, the reception of the former president. We made sure that everybody else understood that the person that will be visiting our studios that day is not, your everyday kind of visitor at our studios. So we prepared ourselves before his arrival, a day before, because we knew before time that he was going to be visiting our studios. So everybody came to the office the following day well prepared and how to handle themselves. Everybody needs to be in the office, no late comings, no up and down movements, and then we would sit there, to discuss, the planning of the bulletin and how the interview should be conducted in the studio. But now, coming down to me and him working as colleagues, look, Oom Fred was versatile, as I've already said. But at the same time, he tend to be naughty at times, like everybody else. But at the same time, that kind of naughtiness in him could be, shall we say, the lighter part of every person, in your workplace. Like you, Colin, everybody at work, you will have your light moments and your bad moments at work. But look, when it came to interaction with other colleagues, he maintained the kind of, people will say, it's a friendship kind of interaction, but I wouldn't say it's a friendship kind of interaction. I would say, it's a healthy working relationship. And he was able to mentor. He was a very, 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 shall I say, he was a very careful mentor. He was gifted in mentoring people. Especially when it came to things like, news presentation, because he was versatile in all the languages. Look, he would always tell, like I used to tell the presenters, that, look, it's better for us to rectify the mistakes now. If there is anything that you don't understand in terms of the bulletin that you are going to be presenting, in terms of your pronunciation, in terms of, different names in the bulletin, let us see what your problems are and let us help you out. Because, once the mistake goes out on air, it's gone. It's gone, and there is nothing you can do about that mistake. So Oom Fred was that kind of a person. He would want somebody to be relaxed in the studio, be capable of controlling the situation in the studio as a presenter, and relax, and knowing that you are going to be having a smooth bulletin. He would always query anybody who would go to the studio unprepared. Because he was one person who would notice a mistake while he's in the office and there is a mistake in the studio. And Fred will tell you exactly what is the cause of that mistake in the studio. So he was a very good mentor when it came to, training people.
All right, Steve, thank you so much for making time to speak to us about the life and times of Fred Mogamisi. And we really appreciate your time, sir. Thank you so much.